Distinguished college, esteemed guests and friends of productivity, greetings and welcome. I'm Dr. Muhammad Ali Hafsa, the moderator of this session today. I'm moderating this session from the National Productivity Organization of Indonesia in Jakarta. It is a both privilege and a responsibility to open today's APOP talk on explainable AI and blockchain for smarter supply chain. This theme could not be more timely. Across Asia and the world, supply chain are no longer quite the office function. They are front-page stories, from food safety to vaccine distribution, from ethical sourcing to climate resilience. Supply chain have become the nervous system of our economies and the mirror of our values. Yet, as vital as they are, supply chain are also fragile. We have witnessed how shock ripples through them, pandemic, conflict, climate events, or sudden shift in demand and expose their vulnerabilities. This is why the question before us today is not simply how do we make supply chain faster or cheaper. The deeper question is how do we make them smarter, fairer, and more trustworthy. Here, technology becomes not an accessory, but an enabler of transformation. Artificial intelligence brings us predictive power and speed. Explainable AI ensure that this intelligence is transparent, accountable, and free from hidden bias. Blockchain secures data in immutable records, guaranteeing trust, traceability, and integrity across borders and between partners who might never meet in person. Together, SAI and blockchain represent more than digital tools. They are, in essence, a new social contract for supply chains, where intelligence is coupled with transparency and productivity is aligned with responsibility. But the promise of transparency and intelligence also comes with challenges. Regulations are evolving unevenly, technical standards are still emerging, and questions of privacy, scalability, and governance remain open. Our task today is not only to admire this breakthrough, but to interrogate them, to ask, what must we do now at the policy, corporate, or societal level to ensure that smart supply chain are also fair, secure, and human-centered? To help us navigate this frontier, we are honored to have with us today Dr. Avinash BM, Associate Professor at the Kazakh-British Technical University, Almaty, Kazakhstan. Dr. Avinash is a scholar and practitioner at the forefront of these technologies. His research and publication explore not only the technical mechanics of explainability and blockchain, but also their profound implication for resilience, compliance, and competitiveness in global value chains. His perspective is uniquely relevant to today's discussion, where the challenge is not only to adopt advanced technologies, but to embed them in ways that strengthen trust, sustainability, and inclusiveness. Dr. Avinash, really appreciate the opportunity to have this session by you. Looking forward to having a meaningful conversation with you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for the invite, and I'm glad to be here.
It is with great pleasure that I now invite Dr. Avinash BM to deliver his keynote presentation on explainable AI and blockchain for smarter supply chain. Dr. Avinash, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you once again. Before I begin my presentation, I once again wholeheartedly thank APO for organizing this particular event, which is much need of the hour. That is going to create a lot of impact on the productivity across organizations and business, not only in the APO member countries, but across the globe. So with this, I would like to get into the presentation, and we are going to discuss about the topics that are more relevant for today and the future as well. So as the moderator mentioned, we are going to talk today about the explainable artificial intelligence and blockchain for smarter supply chains. Dear ladies and gentlemen, good day to all of you. I hope we are going to have a fruitful session in the next few minutes to understand some of the key concepts that are very much relevant for supply chains today. I'm sure each one of you have heard about artificial intelligence, blockchain, and supply chains. But what we are going to discuss today is a little ahead of that, which can create a lot of value to the businesses that are actually taking place today. So today business are looking forward for enhancing transparency and bringing the trust in each and every stage of their business, where explainable artificial intelligence is going to intersect with blockchain, especially for advancement of smarter supply chains. Now, before we discuss anything that is related to explainable artificial intelligence or maybe blockchain or smarter supply chain, I would like to give you a fundamental preview about what supply chain is, what problems we are facing, and why is it that there is a need of the hour to move towards smarter supply chain. As most of you are aware, let me try to unmask some of the concepts that you people already know. So what exactly we mean by supply chain here? While logistics refers to the physical movement of goods and services, supply chain is a concept which is much beyond logistics today. It is nothing but bringing or connecting the people. That is what we refer to as the network of the people. And not just networking the people, it is about bringing together the organizations, all the resources that are involved in the supply chain, and the activities that takes place. It can be a banking activity, it can be sharing of information activity, and also having all the intelligent technologies that are necessary and that need to be associated with the supply chain today. So with this, what are we trying to achieve is that we are trying to have a track of the goods that from the point of origin, how they transit or move towards the final point of consumption. So that is where today we are looking at supply chain. Now, if we are talking about an example, in the food supply chain, the farmers are going to grow the crops, the food or the vegetables, which we ideally call them as materials or raw materials or the food materials, are transported to the processors, and the food is processed or cleaned, and then they are packaged in the factories or in the warehouses. They are stored, and then they are moved to the supermarkets, and then finally they are purchased by the consumers. So this is how we see that there are several activities that takes place which are part of the supply chain. Now, what are the key functions that we look in supply chain here? Now, we say that procurement is the first function there. That is where we go for sourcing of raw materials. Now, it is not just about procurement. It is not just about sourcing. Today, what we have to look at is called as strategic sourcing. Not just I buy or procure the materials, from where I buy, at what quantities I buy, at what qualities I buy. That is where the strategic sourcing comes into picture. And next is coming to the operations. It is not just about the production or manufacturing. It's about the best manufacturing practices that we follow, or what we call it as, can we bring the lean practices into this, where we can try to reduce the wastages. And the physical movement of the goods that takes place. The physical movement of the goods can happen between different cities, different towns, and different countries, where there may be different languages, and each of the countries have different time zones. The temperatures are different, especially when we are moving the food products, which are very fragile to the environmental conditions. So how do we manage these things? And the inventory management, especially the storage as well as the warehousing. And finally, which is the most important or the key reason behind the existence of the entire process, what we call it as the customer service. So end of the day, delivering the product to the customers and to make them happy. So the key objective here, what we look in case of supply chain, is that we must be in a position to deliver the right product in the required number of quantity. That is what we call it as a right quantity, at the right time, at the right place to the customer. I will repeat this. We are delivering the right product in the right quantity at the right time in the right place. We should also ensure that we must be in a position to deliver these goods and services at the least cost, that is the lowest possible cost, while ensuring that the quality standards are always met and ultimately the customer is satisfied. So now we need to bring all these things in supply chain. Now, why does this actually matters? Can't we try to do without all these things? But why it actually matters? The first thing today, the business, due to huge competition, and in order to achieve competitive advantage, everybody want to have efficiency in their business processes. And we have to look at cost effectiveness. The cost is one of the predominant factor that impacts our business as well as our goods and services. So how do we try to cut down the cost without compromising on the quality, and try to keep customers happy always, And we have to achieve competitive advantage over the competitors so that we can remain prime in the marketplace. So this is basically a brief introduction to what exactly the supply chain is all about. But however, when we have to achieve all these things that are related to supply chain is no free from complexities. There are going to be several challenges. There are several complexities and issues that has to be addressed. Now, I'll just highlight three important issues. Of course, there are quite a lot of issues, but I'll just highlight about some of the three important ones. The first is lack of transparency. What happens in case of traditional supply chain is there are some opaque operations that are taking place, and it is very difficult to track the goods. Suppose if I'm buying a laptop, I do not know who is the seller, from whom the shipping happens, who is going to deliver the goods, the laptop to me is something that I will not be able to track. And I will not be able to verify the origin of the components of these laptops. Okay. And I'm really not sure about whether the components are ethically sourced. So this leads to a very limited visibility and accountability across the supply chain network. So that is where the lack of transparency exists in the traditional supply chain. And also we see data inconsistency and frauds. In traditional supply chain, we see that the manual record keeping takes place, and disparate system leads to data errors. And the data is stored in their own formats, their own regional languages, in their own way of writing down the accounting procedures or writing down the business procedures. And this leads to a lot of inconsistencies because the data is stored in silos and integration is going to become a big challenge. And also another important element we see is that the fraudulent activities that can actually take place. We do not know if there is any duplicate products that is entering into supply chain. There may be fake goods which are entering into supply chain, or there may be, in case of pharmaceutical, there may be counterfeit drugs which are entering into supply chain. So these are some of the challenges that we faced in the traditional aspect. And also inefficient dispute resolution. If there is any kind of disputes or disagreements among the parties in the supply chain, settling these things will take a lot of time because the parties in the supply chain are not clear as to who was the party to the dispute, from whom the mistake happened, whether it was a deliberate, whether it was an oversight, whether it was due to environmental situations and circumstances. So these things are going to hinder the operations, and it is going to erode the trust among the participants. So these are some of the complexities that we are going to face through the supply chains. But today we are talking about the smarter supply chain. Why do we need a smarter supply chain compared to that of a traditional supply chain? Or what exactly is a smarter supply chain? Today we are talking about smartphones, smart equipments, smart gadgets. Similarly, we have to bring that particular concept to the supply chain, what we call it as smarter supply chain. So what do we mean by this? The first thing is, when it is a smarter supply chain, it is digitally enabled. When I say digitally enabled, all the parties to the supply chain or all the stakeholders to the supply chain are using digital technologies to their business processes. The farmers are using mobile phones where they can see the temperatures, they can do the weather forecasting. The transportation systems are digitally enabled. The warehouses are digitally enabled. The sellers are digitally enabled, and even the customers are digitally enabled. This is where the concept of smart comes into the picture. And moreover, they are very intelligent. When I say they are very intelligent, they are able to learn from data, and they are able to predict what next. They are able to predict what may be the demand for the goods, or when the temperature may fall, or how long can we store this particular products, or probably how much of additional discounts we should give so that we can finish selling of the products that are there in the warehouse shelves. See, like this, there are going to be a lot of intelligent decisions that has to be taken during the process. And the third important thing is that the responsive supply chain. When I say the responsive supply chain, the people or the partners in the supply chain should be responsive to the queries or the questions, or if there is any information needs among the parties there. So in order to be smarter, the organizations should bring in several technologies into their supply chain. That is only when they can become smarter. And what kind of technologies? It can include artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, the blockchain, automation. All these things will lead to more visibility, efficiency, agility, as well as the decision making becomes more better, it becomes more concrete. And not only it happens at one particular part of the supply chain, this can happen at all part of the supply chain where different vendors are actually located there. So if we look at some of the key features of supply chain, yes, the real-time visibility of goods and services are there. If I'm trying to order a goods or service, in which warehouse it is located, which country it is located, from which supplier it is located. And the companies can do predictive analytics, where the demand can increase, where the demand can fall. Automation, the repetitive task, especially if we are trying to do some documentation, and if it is a repetitive task, that can be automated. And we can integrate the blockchain. And explainable artificial intelligence comes into the picture. I will explain this in the next few slides. And sustainability tracking is going to be there, where we can track the goods when they are moving in the supply chain. And there are going to be collaborative platforms through APIs which can integrate the entire process of the business. Now, why these supply chains are going to be called as smarter? So if we look at, we call it as smarter because, as I just mentioned, the systems are going to learn from data. The data is going to be fed into the systems, and based on the data that has been fed, where we have to be very cautious as to what kind of data is getting into the system. If we are putting in the wrong data or repetitive data or junk data, then it is going to have, or it is going to hamper the rest of the process. So first, importantly, we have to ensure the right data get into the systems, and these systems are going to learn from that particular data, and they can predict future events. When I say predict future events, in which country or in which cities, in which provinces there is demand, where it can increase, where it can decrease, how the consumer behavior is changing in different places, where actually the promotions are required. And not just that, whenever a decision is taken, it explains its decision, which is very crucial. If I say that I am going to grant a car loan to a customer, it is not just about I am granting a car loan to a customer. Why did that customer qualify? I should explain it. Why does the customer qualify for this? Or if I tell a patient that, no, this drug cannot be consumed by you, this medicines cannot be consumed by you, this is what my AI says. But my explainable AI says that, why a patient cannot take these medicines? Are they allergic towards that particular thing? So this is why we call it as smarter. And they're in a position to adapt to changes very quickly. So today we see that there is a lot of resilience in the supply chain. It can be because of the geopolitics. It can be because of the policies. It can be because of the tariff, or it can be because of the trade wars, whatever is taking place. So we must ensure that our supply chain can adapt to any of these changes quickly. So why is it important again? As I said, the real-time visibility is crucial. And today we are going for data-driven decisions, not just based on our intuitions. And the decisions have to be very fast. And we have to try to bring in the cost that is involved in the supply chain. And agility is very important, that is adapting to the changes. Resilience have to be handled. And customer experience should be enhanced, and also it should be increased. And most importantly today, we have to make the entire process sustainable. And it has to be sustainable to all the stakeholders or all the parties in the supply chain and to the society as well. And we have to follow the government compliances of a particular country. And we have to abide by the rules and regulations of a particular country where we are selling our goods and services. And ultimately, an organization always wants to achieve the competitive advantage. So this is where the smarter supply chain actually comes into picture. Now, to take a quick overview about the difference between the traditional and smarter supply chain, to give a basic understanding, decision making, yes, in traditional it is manual, whereas in smart supply chain it is data driven, and it is also powered by artificial intelligence. Visibility in traditional is lacking, whereas in case of smarter there is an end-to-end visibility from the point of procurement to the point of consumption. All the people or the parties in the supply chain can see the information. Communication, yes, it is siloed in traditional supply chain, whereas in case of smarter supply chain, there are integrated platforms and there is a real-time collaboration where the data or the information get exchanged in the real time. And inventory management in the traditional, it is more push-based. That is, I will manufacture and then I will push it to the marketplace. Whereas in case of smarter supply chain, it is demand-driven. Pull-based model also can be used, and it is optimized by using artificial intelligence as well as machine learning technologies. And the responses to, in case of disruptions in traditional, it is very reactive and slow, whereas in case of smarter, it becomes more proactive and predictive with risk forecasting. So you can observe the kind of advantages we are going to have with respect to smart supply chain are concerned. And automation level is very low or manual process, whereas in case of smarter supply chain, it is going to be very high level of automation, and it is going to reduce the human efforts that is required for repetitive tasks. It leads to more of workplace empowerment. And transparency and traceability is more often paper-based in case of traditional supply chain, which is a very big challenge. Whereas in case of smarter supply chain, there is a full traceability via blockchain as well as the digital records that we are going to maintain in the blockchain. Customer experience is going to be delayed, whereas in case of traditional, whereas in case of smarter supply chain, it is going to be more personalized. This is very important. When we are talking about smart supply chain, customer experience is not just about all customers are happy. We are talking about how each and every customer can be happy. Somebody is happy because of the fast delivery of goods. Somebody is happy because of the conversation. Somebody is happy because of they got the good deal when they purchase the product or services. Somebody is happy because the goods were stored in a good conditions and it was not hampered or any kind of damages were taken place. So each individual has their own personalized way of experiencing great things, and that is possible through the smarter supply chains. And they're very fast as well as responsive. Sustainability monitoring is possible with the smarter supply chain because we focus on real-time tracking of carbon footprint, especially when we are talking about the green gases or any other gases that are left to the environment because of the human activity. That can be tracked, and we can try to see how these carbon footprints can be managed really well so that there is no negative impact on the society. And ethical sourcing comes into the picture, that we are buying the goods from the right sources. Compliances are very important when it comes to smart supply chain. They are all digitally enabled. Cost efficiency brings in more competitive advantage, and scalability is a very important factor. In a traditional supply chain, we may follow some basic technologies. I have a computer, I have MS Office, or maybe I have some spreadsheets, I have an ERP solution. Whereas in case of smart supply chain, we are going to use technologies like the cloud, where it is easily scalable, and we use technologies like big data, maybe for predictive analytics. We are going to use several digital tools and try to bring the blend of technology here. So this is where the traditional supply chain completely differs from a smarter supply chain, and smarter supply chain proves to be the most required part of the future, the businesses. Now let us also try to see why smart supply chain matters. Most of the companies try to look only the tangible benefits today. Of course, it has got both tangible and intangible benefit, or what we call it as both direct and indirect benefit, or what we call it as measurable and strategic benefits also, or we call it as quantifiable and qualitative benefits also. Now, why it matters? Yes, bringing in smarter supply chain, it reduced the operational cost. Day-to-day operations cost are reduced because of automation and other processes. Lower inventory holding cost, because we don't have to keep stock of too much of goods, because we know how much of goods are required and we can manufacture the same, or we can try to procure the same amount of goods which are actually required. And delivery times are very faster. Order accuracy is improved on entire supply chain. It may be from the customer to the seller, or maybe seller to the supplier, or supplier to the raw materials supplier, or anybody who is there in the entire part of the supply chain there. And it leads to decrease in waste. That is what we call as lean concept, which is very much essential, and that is leading to lean supply chains. And reduced rate of returns, that is the sales returns are going to be reduced drastically. Higher throughput is going to be there, and we have to do compliance and the cost reduction. So these are some of the tangible benefits that can be measurable. But now what we also have to focus in smarter supply chain is the non-measurable, but they are strategic benefits that are going to be there. Greater transparency and trust. All the parties in the supply chain trust each other, which is very important. And there is a transparency of information. Suppose if I am purchasing some medicines, I know who is the supplier, who is the distributor, who is the manufacturer, from where did they purchase those particular medicine components. Suppose if I am buying a car, I know where my engine was manufactured, or electric batteries were there. That is what we call as cobalt. and where these batteries were sourced from, were they ethically sourced. So this create a kind of trust among the people. That is where people will tend to agree to a company's business. And there is going to be enhanced customer satisfaction, as I said, improved agility and resilience, your ability to face any challenges that comes, because tomorrow we do not know. Pandemic came in, we never expected. And trade wars happens, we did not know. Tariffs keeps changing, and suddenly there is a global disruption there. We also see that there was disruption in the water transport very recently in one of the canals a few years ago, and there was entire disruption that actually took place. So these smarter supply chain will help us to handle or manage these kind of agility with greater resilience. And strong brand reputations are very important. I'll give you some of the examples in the next few slides. It leads to better decision making and gain competitive advantage and workforce enablement. When I say workforce enablement, the people can do better jobs instead of doing the repetitive jobs, and the workforce can try to be more and more focusing on the strategic work instead of doing the routine work. So when we see why supply chain matters, we see that if we have to build a smarter supply chain, right? When I say that why smarter supply chain matters, and if I have to build a smarter supply chain, how do we build it actually? As I mentioned in the earlier slide, smarter supply chain are very intelligent actually, right? So if we have to make these supply chains intelligent, that is going to be possible when we bring in the technologies here. Now, what kind of technologies are usually required for building smarter supply chain? The first thing is the explainable artificial intelligence, what we are going to discuss today. And it can be Internet of Things. Here, when I say Internet of Things, I'm referring to industrial Internet of Things, which is specifically focused on manufacturing. And IoT, where all the devices are connected through the internet. And the blockchain, what again we are going to discuss today. Cloud computing solution, big data, 5G technologies, edge computing, digital twins, cyber security, like this. These are all the essential technologies that are going to be part of smarter supply chain. But focusing on today's core element, we are going to talk about how the XAI and blockchain, when integrated together, can create smarter supply chains. So first, let me give you a small overview about what AI is. I'm sure all of you are aware about this. You have a system which has a human intelligence, or what we call it as an artificial intelligence. It is embedded on the systems. Or we have computer systems which are capable of performing the task which typically requires human intelligence, or the human intelligence is replaced by machine intelligence, which acts replica to the humans. So it can be related to reasoning powers, solving different business problems, and it can be related to different decision makings. It can be learning by self, these things. Now, what artificial intelligence do? It helps you to solve the problems. Now, the question is, yes, I'm using artificial intelligence to solve my business problems. It is giving me several solutions. It is helping me to take decisions. It is telling me why to do this, why not to do. Now, in this case, it tells yes or no, but the question is, what is the main reason behind that? Suppose, if I take a particular example, I go to a bank and I will ask for a loan. Now, the system will say whether I should be given loan or not, yes or no. This is artificial intelligence. Instead of human deciding, the machine decided. But what is explainable artificial intelligence means? The explainable artificial intelligence uses different techniques and methods where the humans can understand, interpret, and trust the output decision-making process of AI systems. So if I have to put in simple words, there is human intelligence, there is machine intelligence, or what we call it as artificial intelligence. Now, making the artificial intelligence understandable by the humans is what we call as explainable artificial intelligence. I go to the bank will approve the loan. How did they approve the loan? Their artificial intelligence technology said, yes, loan can be given to me. But there was no explanation, why did I qualify for the loan? Or if the loan is rejected, bank says, no, your loan is rejected. I say loan is rejected and I come out. But the bank should be able to tell me why the loan was rejected. Is it because my salary was less? Is it because I had too much of credit? Or is it because my credit scores were low? Or is it because I do not qualify in that particular category? So this is where the explainable artificial intelligence comes. Means it is going to explain every decisions that are taken by the artificial intelligence. So this is the first point. The second technology that we are talking about today is blockchain. Now, what is blockchain? It is nothing but a distributed ledger, which is more decentralized in place. It captures the data and records the transactions, and these data records are secure, that nobody can change the data records once they are created, unless all the parties are aware about the changes that are taking place. And it is tamper proof in the sense a hacker cannot come and make changes to the data. If they try to do, all the other parties who are related to the data will get to know about it. So in simple, it is nothing but a distributed ledger. So in traditional database, where there was one particular person or a single authority who was controlling all the databases, in case of blockchain, because as we have multiple parties in the supply chain, we are going to have the multiple distributed ledgers, what we call it as network of nodes, where each participant has access to the immutable version of data. When I say immutable version of data, only the genuine or the original data is going to be there, and nobody can personally make any kind of tamper to that particular data over there. So this is where the blockchain comes into the picture. So what I will do, let us see short videos of each of these technologies, which can give you a better understanding about practically how actually they work as compared to whatever theoretically I have just explained. So please take a look at this particular video.
Have you ever been denied a loan and had no idea why? Or maybe you've heard about AI diagnosing cancer, but the doctor can't explain how it works. That's because most AI today is a black box. It makes decisions, but can't explain them. That's where XI comes in, Explainable AI, and it's about to change everything. Explainable AI is like lifting the lid off the black box. Instead of just saying yes or no, XI tells you why. It highlights which factors mattered most. Your income, your medical history, your age. It helps experts and regular people actually understand how AI thinks. Trust is everything. When AI makes decisions about our health, money, or freedom, we need to know we can trust it. And if we can't explain AI, we can't check it for bias, errors, or unfair treatment. XI helps keep AI fair, transparent, and ethical. In medicine, XAI can show doctors exactly where an AI spotted a tumor on a scan. In finance, it can explain why someone was approved or rejected for a loan. In criminal justice, it helps reveal what factors influenced risk assessments or sentencing support tools. There are special tools made to explain AI decisions, like LIME and SHAP. LIME simulates how small changes in your data affect the outcome. SHAP breaks down the decision, showing which features contributed the most. And saliency maps highlight the most important pixels in an image, showing what the AI focused on. Explainable AI is the bridge between machine intelligence and human understanding. It builds trust, it protects people, and it makes AI a little more human.
So what we see here in case of explainable artificial intelligence is, it is a bridge between the machine or the artificial intelligence and the human understanding. It explains why. And this can bring a lot of clarity among the people, getting an explanation for whatever decisions that are taken, which is going to create trust in the process. And the trust in the process is going to be a significant contributor for qualitative benefits in the supply chain. Now let us take a look at a video on blockchain.
A blockchain is a ledger of transaction records. These can be anything from stock trades to medical records to a history of who owned a used car. Blockchain is made up of blocks. A block contains all the transaction records for a set period of time. Bitcoin, for example, adds a new block every 10 minutes. Each new block contains two important things: a list of every single transaction that took place around the world in that period of time, plus a code, called a hash, that references the blocks that came before it, thus the chain part of the blockchain. These hashes are much easier to compare rather than trying to keep track of every individual transaction in the world since the beginning of time. And because each one references the blocks that came before it, it revalidates every single transaction repeatedly down to the original Genesis block. A blockchain is decentralized, meaning no one entity controls what's in it. In Bitcoin, the blockchain is validated by miners, who are rewarded for generating the correct hash with new Bitcoins. In other blockchain systems, this job might be split up between multiple banks, governments, or hospitals. When a new block is added to the chain, those computers verify that all the transactions actually took place. If anyone tries to cheat the system, their block will be different from anyone else's. Because a blockchain requires consensus between all parties, the cheater's version of the blockchain, called a fork, is eventually thrown out, along with their phony transaction. All of this makes a blockchain immutable, meaning it is extremely difficult to modify or tamper with. It is a single, permanent record agreed upon by multiple parties, none of which have more power than the other. It doesn't require trust in a single institution, nor do we need worry about bad guys hacking in and changing things, so long as they're outnumbered by the good guys. This means a blockchain can be accessible to the public. Anyone can go back in the ledger and verify that a transaction took place. The most famous example of blockchain is Bitcoin, which uses blockchain technology to prevent people from spending the same Bitcoin twice. But it has dozens of other applications beyond currency, including storing medical records, voting, writing smart contracts, storing files, trading stocks and bonds, keeping track of who owns what, and much, much more.
Okay, this was a short video about the blockchain, which gives you a basic understanding about how actually it works, how consensus mechanism works, how data is stored in the distributed ledgers, and it is going to be tamper-proof. That is what we call it as immutable, where the parties will not be in a position to check on these things when it comes to doing any kind of personal changes, unless all the parties to the supply chain, unless all the parties to the blockchain are going to give the consensus. So we saw the videos on XAI and the blockchain, and now let us see how these two technologies are going to benefit the smarter supply chains. So let us first discuss about the explainable artificial intelligence, how it can try to help in creating smarter supply chains. The first thing is transparent decision making. So what does XAI does? It allows the managers to understand why AI systems make certain predictions, why demand forecast has taken place, what kind of demand, why the demand is going up, why the demand is going down, and especially the routing through which location or the geographical locations or through which directions the routing has to take place. And also why we need to do a particular supplier selection. Is it because the supplier is supplying at the cheapest cost, or is it because it's the highest qualitative raw materials, or is it because he has the best of the terms and conditions, or what exactly is the reason why we are going to take a decision? That is what it is going to help on, because it explains everything. And also improved risk management by explaining how risks are predicted, how the supplier failure or delivery delays can actually happen, how XAI helps in decision makers to take preemptive actions with confidence instead of taking the reactive initiatives. After the problem occurs, we try to be more reactive rather than that being preemptive, or we have to be more proactive in terms of taking any kind of decisions that can hamper the business because of the supply chain complexities. And compliance and accountability, XAI is always supporting the regulatory compliances, because different countries or different governments will have different regulatory compliances, and the documentations of each of the countries differs, the regulations differs, the currency differs, the time zones differs, the laws of each of the countries are going to differ. In this case, how the decisions are going to be made, especially in industries like pharma, defense, or food, is where the explainable artificial intelligence is going to help in adhering to the compliance and bringing in accountability. And one of the key points was observed in the video, which was talking about the bias detection and bringing in the fairness, where using the explainable artificial intelligence, it identifies and corrects biasness in data and in any AI models that are going to be there. Thus, it can ensure fair treatment across parties, across all the regions there. So this is where the XAI brings the benefits. Whereas in case of blockchain, yes, the first thing is immutable traceability. That is where we can have tamper-proof records. That is, no parties can change the records by themselves, or they cannot alter or they cannot delete unless there is a consensus mechanism which can be agreed by all the parties who are part of those distributed ledgers there. And this is mainly vital for the food industries, pharma industries, especially the luxury goods. And then next comes is the real-time trust and verification. Trusted transaction takes place between the partners, and there are no intermediaries that are there, and the smart contracts are there. So when I'm going to talk about the smart contracts are nothing but the self-executing agreements. These self-executing agreements are going to trigger some actions. Actions can be like making the payments, or it can be the shipments. And these self-executing agreements will be triggered automatically based on the preconditions that are set, or the precondition should be met by the parties. So this is going to reduce the manual intervention, where the technology itself is going to make sure that the agreements are created and agreed upon all the parties in the supply chain. And not just that, they try to minimize the errors, and it speeds up the entire process of running the business there. And it brings transparency, where all the stakeholders can access timely verified data, and the data can be accessed in the predefined permission levels. That is, the data will not be just open to everybody, because if that happens, there is no confidentiality, and that may lead to breach of the information confidentiality. To overcome this, whichever party is allowed or permissible to view the data or to get the information, only those people will be subject to get the data. The data sharing happens only among those people, and the data sharing policies are going to be in place, especially. And efficient audit and compliance is there, and blockchain automates the audit trials that naturally take place because the data is captured in stores. There is no kind of interventions from any third party to make any changes. It is very straightforward, trusted, and transparent. And the regulatory documentation is always up to date, because the blockchain not only captures the data, or the data records get into the distributed ledger, there is also going to be the timestamp, which is very crucial there. So when we have the timestamp in place, all the auditing and compliances elements are going to be taken care of. But what we have to importantly see is that how we can try to integrate these two technologies, where when they are brought together, we can get interpretable insights, recommendations, where the managers can actually understand, they can trust and act upon the complex analytics, which are very much essential. And also, most importantly, it can help in model output that are interpretable, and all the stakeholders in the supply chain can understand what is actually happening, how the goods are moving, where they are there, and the kind of transparency it brings in, having the visibility of the movement of goods and services there. Whereas blockchain, on the other hand, as I said, it is an immutable ledger. Once data is recorded, it cannot be altered or deleted. It cannot be overwritten without the consensus mechanism. So with this, what is happening? We can try to see that there is data integrity across all the nodes, and there is a real-time tracking of the goods that are there. So when integrated, both XAI and blockchain can bring in, or they can create a robust framework where data provenance is there, model reasoning is there, and automated smart contracts are all going to work in the harmony there. So now when we look at synergy in action, what kind of synergy in action can take place? The first, decision transparency. XAI explains the decisions, blockchain is going to verify it. Data integrity. Blockchain secures the data, XAI uses the trustworthy data for bringing in smarter logics. They can write the smarter logics using the machine learning as well as the deep learning. Trust and accountability, together they ensure that all the decisions are understandable by the parties in the supply chain, especially the managers, and they are provably correct. And AI can suggest and optimize smart contract rules. As I said, smart contracts are going to generate the contracts by themselves, and the rules can be changed based upon the parties or the suppliers or the country or the individuals, and they explain clearly why such rules are going to be important. And supply chain auditing as to why a problem occurred, when and where. Blockchain tells when and where because, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be a timestamp on each of the transactions that took place and when it was recorded in the ledgers. There is going to be an enhanced collaboration among all the people or the partners that leads to trustworthy data, and resilience and real-time responsiveness are going to be possible. Now, I'll just give a guide to how XAI and blockchain can be integrated. Please note that this is not a one strategy that fit all the businesses. Each of the businesses should first think about their business and why they require blockchain, why they require XAI, why they require integration, or do they also need some supplementary technologies that are going to be associated with that. It is just a guide, but each of the businesses can decide how they want to actually implement, tailoring, make the process according to their specific requirements. Define the case, what your business is all about, and why you want blockchain, why you want AI, and what activities in the business processes requires these technologies. So we should answer the question why first, and deploy the best models that are going to be essentials, and integrate blockchain for secured data management. Say, for example, we are going to make use of the hyperledgers. We are going to log in the critical data. We're going to create tamper-proof records and create bi-directional link between XAI and blockchain. There is nothing that something moves from XAI to blockchain or blockchain to XAI. It is bi-directional. That is where workflow integration is going to be important, which includes data logging, AI processing, as well as proof anchoring. And enable smart contract with AI logics. That is where the smart contracts come into picture. Use APIs or middleware for integration of different technologies we use, because sometimes we may be using the legacy systems, disparate systems are going to be there. So how do we try to bring in integration among all these things? And last but not the least, ensure there is going to be security, compliance, and ethics, which are going to be very important. And that has to be followed in order to have sustainability in the supply chain. Now, what about regulatory compliances? Yes, regulatory compliances are important. Just bringing in the technology to our business will not help. We have to follow the regulatory compliances. Today, regulatory technologies are going to be there where you have to be specific to the legal obligations of the countries or the decisions or the policies that are taking place, or it can be regulatory compliances of individual organizations or partners to the supply chain. So we call it as RegTech or regulatory technologies. Now here we have to abide by the data protection and privacy laws, and we have to look into industry specific regulation, because medical or medicine industry is different from the food industry is different from the manufacturing industry, and how the XAI governance and explainability regulations are going to be adhered. Trade and customs regulations when it comes to the payments, the deliveries, the returns, the policies that are going to be there, and the smart contract legality. Whenever the smart contract is generated, to what extent it is legally viable, to what extent it is legally acceptable, that is what we are supposed to look. So a compliance by design approach is very important for this, where we are going to integrate legal, ethical, and technical safeguards, which are going to ensure that smart supply chains are also very secure. They are very lawful, where we abide by the rules and regulations, and they're going to be more responsible, especially concerning the sustainable development goals and also environmental goals, societal goals, which are going to be part of sustainability. But is there any challenges in integrating? Yes, there are a lot of challenges in integrating XAI and blockchain in smarter supply chain. I'm going to highlight some, 3 important challenges here. One is interoperability issues, where most of the companies today, they have legacy systems where they just run their business on ERPs. Now, the new blockchain and AI will require cloud computing, AI platforms, machine learning, these things. So now there is a necessary for a bridge between these particular systems or technologies there. Now, what are the standardized protocols that was followed earlier and what is followed now? And how do we try to migrate from legacy system to the new systems? Or how do we interconnect both the systems if we need both? So this is where the interoperability issues have to be addressed. Regulatory complexities will continue because of the geopolitical tension, changes in the tariff, trade wars takes place. And there is going to be different jurisdictions in which the business is done, and we have to adapt to the global adoptions. And not just that, in each of the countries, they may have different languages, different types of suppliers, different types of intermediaries. The third one is the talent gap, which is very crucial today, which many companies are facing. There is lack of skilled professionals who are actually necessary for implementing these particular technologies. And most importantly, remember, as I said earlier, XAI is not one size fits all. So we have to make a proper choice, which technology to use, which model to depend upon, because each of these should bring, end of the day, the value to our business, and it has to ensure that the business become more stable, scalable, following the regulatory compliances. So I'll just give a quick real world applications. These explainable artificial intelligence and blockchain are used in pharmaceutical industries. Especially, we can track the movement of the pharmaceutical goods or the medicines, where the medicines are coming from. Are there any counterfeit of drugs, which is very important? Any counterfeit drugs are entering into supply chain, we can easily get to know. This helps in making sure that the medicines are ethically sourced, manufactured, supplied to the right people, and it goes to the patient who is eligible for taking that particular kind of medicines there. So no tampering can happen in this particular entire process. Food and agriculture, tracing fresh produce from the farmers, where it goes to the factories, get manufactured, and it reach to the end customers. Food and agriculture are going to use IBM Food Trust technologies. Luxury goods, this is one of the biggest challenge luxury industry is facing today. Say, for example, if I'm trying to buy a luxury watch, and there may be a fake watch which enters into this business. So now, because of the fake watch enters and problem occurs, tomorrow I may think wrong about a particular brand of luxury goods. So here what happens in this case, providing irrefutable proof of origin, right, and authenticity for high value items, combating the illicit trade in fake luxury goods is possible, because every product that enters the supply chain is going to have a digital identity. So a counterfeit or fake product cannot enter into supply chain, because every smallest of the item or a components have digital identity. And especially automotive industries are going to make use of this to make sure that they are having the ethical sourcing of raw materials, and then they are assembled and then they are sold in the marketplace, where the final customer can know each of the component of their automotive, from whom it came, who was the manufacturer, on what date these particular activities were actually done there. So some of the examples that we can talk about here, Walmart use the blockchain technology, especially for food traceability, and where they can try to see that if there are any food items which are perishable, if they are damaged, and if they are not in a good condition, at what particular point the food was damaged or the food was rotten, they can remove it, and they can identify at which source the problem is actually occurring. Whether it is from the supplier perspective, or because of the cold storage, there was some problem in the particular food product, they're able to easily track down all these things. And IBM, they developed IBM Food Trust platform, and Merck's, they partnered with IBM to create the trade lens, especially in the global shipping. They can improve the efficiency levels, transparency levels, and trust can be brought among different partners in the supply chain. Nestle is using for an efficient supply chain management, and especially, when we see BMW, they utilize blockchain to track cobalt in electric vehicle batteries. When I say the cobalt in electric vehicle battery means, it's all about they ensure that there is going to be a responsible sourcing that is actually taking place among the components. So how the future businesses are going to be benefited? There is going to be agility and responsiveness if we are going to use smarter supply chain. And to have smarter supply chain, we have XAI and blockchain there. The first is the future business will be more agile and responsive. They can have greater efficiencies and cost savings. And there is going to be more transparency, which is going to build trust among the people in the supply chain. Customer experience is going to be phenomenal because it is going to be more personalized. And the organizations will follow all the sustainable, environmental, social, and governance goals, which are very crucial. And risk management can be handled or managed better and ultimately lead to competitive advantage. So companies that invest will thrive in the world where today speed, transparency, and sustainability are defining the success of organizations. So these are some of the list of references. A fusion of intelligence and transparency is what we are looking, capturing the essence of how XAI and blockchain create smarter supply chain. And by integrating XAI and blockchain, future-ready supply chains become more transparent. When I say future-ready, they are referred to as smarter supply chain. And these are the smarter supply chains, which are transparent, intelligent, resilient, and they are going to empower all the businesses to make their businesses faster, fairer, and more accountable, where more accountable decisions across every link in the value chain is going to be possible there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash, for the valuable insight you have just shared in your presentation. And now allow me now to open the dialogue by posing a few questions that build upon your remarks and invite further reflection. Unfortunately, we have a very limited time, even though this is a very interesting topic. But let me come to my first question. My first question is that how can explainability in AI and immutability in blockchain together redefine trust in global supply chain, especially where geopolitical tension and trade disruption prevail?
Okay, that's an excellent and very timely question. What we need to understand here is that the global supply chains are facing rising distress due to geopolitical tension, what you rightly mentioned. There are going to be a lot of trade restrictions and disruptions such as maybe cyber attacks or maybe pandemic or any of these things. So traditional systems depend on paperwork and intermediaries, which is going to slow down reconciliation and leave the gaps for fraud as well as disputes. With respect to these emerging technologies like XAI and blockchain, it can help to redefine the trust, but only when there is going to be a proper governance that is going to be embedded on that. So XAI and AI-driven decisions are more transparent by showing which factors influence the outcomes, such as it can be the supply reliability, tariffs, or port congestions, right? This helps stakeholders understand about the forecast, routing choices, and anomaly detection, and reducing the risk and hidden biases. That is related to the AI. Whereas when it comes to the blockchain, it is going to complement XAI by recording transactions and the AI outputs on immutable ledgers. So this is going to help in preventing the tampering of any shipment records, while permissible networks allow selective data sharing to balance both transparency and confidentiality. And smart contracts are again that are there, which are going to be more compliant to check cross-borders business transactions, but they still depend upon the identity verification, secure key management, as well as legal enforceability. But what we can say in conclusion to this question is that both XAI and blockchain can enhance accountability, verifiability, and auditability in supply chains.
Thank you once again, Dr. Avinash. That was a very enlightening. With that said, let me move on to the next issue. You just mentioned just now pilot project by Walmart and IBM Food Trust, which is showing promising. But what structural or cultural barriers that might prevent widespread scaling across APO members' economies? Dr. Avinash.
Okay. This is a very interesting question that we all need to learn, understand, and implement. Walmart and IBM Food Trust blockchain, their pilot shows that there is a strong potential for traceability, but scaling them across APO organizations or the economies, they are going to face two important types of challenges. The first is the structural barrier. The second is the cultural barrier. So structurally, supply chain in many APO countries, what we see is that they are fragmented and they are dominated by small farmers. Say, for example, Vietnam is there, India is there, Philippines is there, Indonesia is there. You see different coffee planters are there. People are growing different agriculture crops. Like this, when we see that they are more fragmented and they're dominated by the small farmers, especially when I'm talking about the food supply chain industry. And there are several micro enterprises which are feeding these inputs or raw materials to several bigger organizations. But what the challenge here is that these fragmented, dominated by small farmers and micro enterprises, they have low levels of digitalization. It is not that they don't use computers or technology, but the levels of digitalizations are comparatively lesser. So the cost of infrastructure, sensors, training the people, following the regulatory aspects, all these are going to be very big challenge for us. especially when it comes to regulatory inconsistencies like divergent food safety standards, data localization rules are going to be there, and cross-border blockchain integrations becomes a challenge. So scalability is also going to be one challenge that we all have to look into, because as different blockchain platforms often lack interoperability. So this is the first thing which is related to the structural challenges. The second is the cultural challenges. See, culturally, adoption is slowed by traditional resilience that we actually have, and to what extent the trust-based relationship actually exists here. And some of them may be reluctant to share sensitive data, which are very critical. And there is limited digital literacy in the rural areas. So many suppliers may fear losing control of proprietary information once it is recorded immutably on the blockchain. So the resistance to change is also reinforced by established norms of face-to-face dealings and paper-based documentation, right? So overcoming these barriers requires some hybrid adoption models where blockchain is implemented or applied selectively alongside some traditional practices. So building capacity through training programs, what we are really feeling great about organizations like APO, they're conducting several capacity building programs or training programs, creating shared digital infrastructure networks, and bringing a sensitivity among harmonizing regional policies are going to be very much essentials. And ultimately, APO economies, what I believe is that will definitely gradually tailor the strategies, what is to be done to the future business needs, rather than directly replicating related to some Western pilot models. I'm sure the APO economies will learn by examples, maybe will learn by mistakes, and tailor according to each company's, each country's needs and requirements, and sure to scale up by capacity building support through organizations like APO.
Thank you very much, Dr. Avinash. That was a sharp and forward-looking answer. I think I will come to my final question, and let me bring us to the future outlook. If XAI and blockchain are the intelligence plus transparency duo of today, what emerging technology, quantum computing, biotraceability, or something unforeseen might disrupt them in the next decade?
Okay, this is definitely a very challenging question to answer, because one thing is we are trying to understand what technology exists today, and when it looks futuristic, which is very agile, futuristic, where there are going to be a lot of disruptions, it is very important for us to at least throw a light about the quantum computing as well as the biotraceability. So thank you for the question, but let me try to share my best knowledge on this particular question. The integration of XAI and blockchain has created today's both intelligence and transparency. And these are created stack for supply chain, but emerging technologies could probably soon disrupt this particular paradigm. Now, the two things, the first one, as you mentioned about quantum computing, is one of the most significant contenders here. While it threatens to undermine current blockchain cryptography, as you are aware, it could also transform logistics optimization by solving complex problems like route planning, energy allocation, trade flow problems, unprecedented speeds, if combined with post-quantum cryptography there. And another key disruptor, what you mentioned, is biotraceability, where goods are tagged and verified at the molecular level. That is DNA tagging for maybe pharmaceuticals products or food products or textile products could offer tamper-proof physically traceability that surpasses blockchain digital authenticity here. So, for example, vaccines with biotags could be authenticated instantly across all the checkpoints, eliminating the counterfeit entry of any of these products. Beyond this, unforeseen, in addition to these two, one is what we were just talking about, the quantum computing and biotraceability. Beyond this, there may be some unforeseen innovation that may come up tomorrow, which we do not know. New technologies, new startups, new innovative thoughts, some disruptive technologies, they may come and may reshape supply chain in ways where it is very difficult to predict. And also what we see today is the whole world is talking about generative AI, And from generative AI, we are already moving towards what we call as agentive AI. And when we bring in agentive AI, in addition to the generative AI, we can see that there are going to be self-governing AI agents who may automatically negotiate contracts and handle the entire logistics. The human interventions is going to be significantly brought down. And also neurotech and behavioral data might refine the demand prediction completely by tapping biofeedback rather than transactional pattern there. And decentralized physical infrastructure network, what we call it as DeepIn, they also could enable peer-to-peer logistics or energy sharing or bypassing traditional structures. So in essence, what we see is that the disruption may not come from one technology alone, but from the convergence of quantum, biotraceability, and decentralized autonomous systems, fundamentally redefining how intelligence and transparency are built into the supply chains.
Thank you very much, Dr. Avinash, for that compelling and thought-provoking presentation. Unfortunately, we run out of the time. You have shown us that the future of supply chains will not be defined solely by efficiency or cost, but the principle of transparency, explainability, and trust. The integration of AI and blockchain is not a distant aspiration. It is already taking shape in the practices of leading companies and forward-looking governments. What matters now is how we as productivity leaders, policymakers, and practitioners interpret these signals and translate them into action. As I reflect on today's session, 3 messages stand out. Intelligence without transparency breeds distrust. XAI reminds us that speed must be coupled with clarity and automation must be accountable. That data without integrity is fragile. Blockchain provides the backbone of trust that supply chains need in an era of volatility and complexity. Technology without failures risks disconnection. We must ensure that smarter supply chains are also fairer, greener, and more inclusive, aligned with the aspiration of our societies. Colleagues, this is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning. The real work lies ahead, building foresight, experimenting boldly, and scaling responsibly. On behalf of the APO, I extend my gratitude to Dr. Avinash BM for his insight and to all of you for your engagement. Let us carry forward today's discussion into our policies, our organization, and our daily practices so that supply chains become not just smarter, but also a force for resilience, equity, and productivity across Asia and beyond. Until our next speed talk, let's remain alert to signals, open to collaboration, and steadfast in our pursuit of inclusive productivity. Thank you and goodbye.